Welcome, everyone. I am really thrilled to have Laura Van Prooyen with me today, and she is going to be reading from her new book, The Wonderful Frances of the Wider Field. And this is a book published by Lily Poetry Review. And just before you start reading, Laura, I just want to read your bio first and then ask you a couple questions about the book. Laura Van Prooyen is author of two earlier collections of poems, Our House Was on Fire and Inkblot and Altar. She is also co-author with Gretchen Burnaby of Text Structures from Poetry, a book of writing lessons for educators. A graduate of the Warren Wilson MFA program for writers, Van Prooyen serves as managing editor of the Cortland Review and lives in San Antonio, Texas. And Laura, so I just wanted to ask you about the theme of Frances of the Wider Field, the overall theme.
Sure. Thanks for having me here today, Kelly. It's great to be in conversation with you. The themes of Frances of the Wider Field, what I would say is that deals a lot with memory, loss of memory, a lot of mother and daughter relationships in this book. But Frances is sort of a touchstone. Frances is a little slippery, and I'll address some of that in the poems that I've chosen to read today. But there's a lot of writing toward absence and questioning, and it becomes sort of an exploration of these things. And you have this character, Frances, who serves as a presence to, I think, in some ways, help the speaker through those questions.
Terrific. I'll have some other questions after the reading, but take it away.
Great. And because Frances is a little bit slippery, I like to start with this poem that's called Location Frances, because occasionally people will ask me, who is Frances? And my response is starting to become more like, what is Frances? So this poem is called Location Frances. When I say Frances, I mean the maple trunk bulging through chain link. I mean the pit bull with spiked collar who lives on the other side. I say Frances, and I sound like a leaking bike tire. Frances, my purple Schwinn, my flowered banana seat. My legs pumping through the subdivision that springs from the field. Frances rides on the air. You might say, I don't understand, and I'd say, this is not my voice. It's something in the leaves that keeps speaking, something that saw me as a child, rubbed a coin on the sole of my foot. When I say Frances, I mean a woman. I mean a place. The dead cling to the land. The living cling to a story that, like currency, changes hands. So another thing that interests me is stories and our histories. And in this case, in this book, so much of it is fragmented. On a literal level, behind some of these poems is the fact that my mother, her mother died giving birth to her. And this is a story she came to know when she was a young child, but any information about that story was withheld from her, in shrouds of not so much secrecy, but, people didn't talk about things like that. So family, other family, her grandmother and things like this, they would give her little bits. So she grew up with the big mystery and knowledge of the absence of the mother who birthed her. I became privy to this story. I just found out actually recently that my siblings didn't know this story, but I was given the story as a teenager. I'm the youngest, and my mom and I are close. So she shared it with me, and I spoke to my siblings about it as if this were common knowledge. They're like, what? So, we get all of these fragments. So that's what this poem is called, is Lineage Fragment. And there's two poems in the book called Lineage Fragment. This is a longer one that's sort of scattered about the page, like shards. Before words pulsing, your mother calling you, naming you, you don't know who named, her voice unrecorded between fibers, cells of your skin that never slough off her blood on the delivery room floor. She held you, you heard, before she left her body, you left her body with force enough to, she loved you, you heard the whole your head left with a rush of blood that would not stop. She would not stop reaching for you, heard from whispers, pity voices, thin as Bible paper, whisper threads, braided, what they said, what they didn't, pity, heard your own skate blades scraping her favorite frozen pond. You heard nothing from your father, who dressed you in fine wool, photographed his grief, cheeks touched with a bit of color. Your father never got over your face, her face in your face, her shape always near, your skin never sloughed off the touch of the mother you never knew, your face rubbed clean by the mother you came to know, woman of metallic grief, took up the baby, held up your father, darned his socks, filled absence with figs. Mother who starched her own mouth shut, who saw in your mouth her dead sister. Dust and stars, the mother of lilies, buckled shoes, tightly braided hair, who reached into loss and pulled out a rake, cleared the ground of pebbles, burned debris, swept clean your slate, her sister's slate that wouldn't be swept at all. So I'm immensely grateful that this book came out while my parents are still alive. Even though my mom is suffering from dementia, she still knows who I am and we remain close. But, this is a long journey into the loss. Uh, the longest goodbye I've heard it called, and I don't even know. I don't, it's happening and it happens sort of slowly, and then all of a sudden you take stock and you realize what's happening. So here's this is an elegy. It's called Elegy for My Mother's Mind. We're walking inside your mind where it's beginning to snow, and no matter how quickly I shovel, the path will go blank, where you'll lose the child who picked every last tulip you waited a solid Chicago winter to watch bloom. Lose the girl who pedaled her Schwinn up and back the driveway while you fried bacon behind the evergreens in an electric pan so the house wouldn't smell. But this night, grackles above us blacken the tree, and you hold on to me as you get into the car. Together, we go to the store where you try on every clearance marked blouse and buy nothing. You're forgetting sadness too, that pool where you used to swim with an armload of bricks, where no slow tug of a rope could pull you from the bottom. You're forgetting about anyone but you, when before dawn on the piano you pound great balls of fire and the old rugged cross and whistle in searing vibrato. You gift dollar store Kleenex, pour beans into wine bottles, lift my chin and say, I'm so glad you were born. Then your pupils widen and tunnel back to before I was here, before my brothers or sister before you lost your father, a time of buses and rain, of radio static, and for a minute you're far from me, so I reach for your trembling hand. So I do live in San Antonio now. However, San Antonio is a wonderful place, and I call it my second hometown because I really do quite love it here. But where I'm from, that's much like really a part of who I am, is the Calumet region, which is right there at the bottom of Lake Michigan, the Illinois-Indiana border. I grew up in South Holland, Illinois. My father grew up in Highland, Indiana, and I went to a school called Illiana, which was like, right there we had everybody across. you know, Interesting trivia, like the time zone used to be at the state line, but so many people from northern Indiana were doing things in Illinois that's why the Eastern time zone does a little jog over in the middle of northern Indiana. So this Calumet region is a pretty gritty place and a really interesting place. Weird pockets of beauty in the middle of all of it. This is called the Calumet region. Truth at my brother's oil change shop is few customers. Beauty is the woman who drives her car over the pit, accidentally steps on the gas instead of the brake, pinning a man to her hood, shattering his back through the window. Beauty can be broken, can be a crumbling hospital like St. James, where I was born, in the hallway because the doctor was too slow. Of that story, my mother can laugh, but birthing my brother, she was knocked out against her will with gas. She woke to find bruises all over her baby's head. Truth means that the doctors' names are not part of the story. That after years of telling and retelling, my mother sees what she can bear, a small, hurt thing that needs her. Like the town she'll never leave, where people talk with a harsh nasal South Side A and say milk instead of milk, where beauty has something to do with highway noise, with grass breaking through the cracks, with the kicked in door on the foreclosed home, where someone left the windows open and let the house fill with rain. And I want to close with this poem called Francis of the Cadillac. Um, we return. I thought it was great to maybe open and close with our mysterious Francis, who becomes that point of comfort and but also questioning, and all kinds of emotions get wrapped up in the ideas that swirl around with Francis. But this is called Francis of the Cadillac. Under her tongue there was a story, in her mouth nails. Frances hammered license plates to the back wall of her garage. There hang the years that sunk like a foot in loose soil, that rusted like a hinge. Whose hand or what machine etched the numbers that cruised along in the exhaust of a town that no longer exists? This is what happens when I check my wristwatch. Frances drives her leather-topped Cadillac between the electrical signals of my brain. There's a railroad crossing, and I don't understand the way she's looking at me. Her body tells me something happened. Her arms, so thin, veins show when she rolls up her sleeves. Still, if I were drowning, I know Frances would save me. She might throw a string of black pearls. She might offer a broom handle worn from her sweeping. She'd pull me to the edge, push pennies from my lungs. But it's the bells of the crossing that make it hard to breathe.
Thank you so much. Those were beautiful. And I have lots of follow-up questions, but I ask them all. I love the idea of Frances, and I was thinking that she comes across in the book sort of like a witness or or some sort of alternate person. I don't know. But she is ineffable, sort of. And I just wondered if you'd talk a little bit more about her and also how many poems have Frances in them in the book.
So the happy thing is I don't understand the mystery either. Like, I promise you that's not a cop out. Um, I think that once in a while we're given gifts as writers, where something happens that feels a little beyond us, and there's really no way to sit down and parse it out what happened. Like, elegy to my mother's mind would be easier to say, well, this happened and then this happened and then. However, Frances as an entity and in the poems, I don't really know. I know that some of the roots of the genesis of the things that I don't think are all that interesting, but then it morphed and it evolved. And also, at the time where these poems were sort of born, I was writing a poem a day in the grind, which I think that um, you're familiar with, but it's a practice where you write, you commit to write something every day for 1 month, and you don't comment on it. You just send it to a group of people for accountability that everybody's writing. And the first poem emerged from that, and I have all the files. They're really weird. It's like all of a sudden something happened in that weird space of that month that launched this. So gratefully, I don't understand all of the things, except what I can say that's a little more tangible is, I tried to write my family's narrative story for probably 20 years and never found a way in. And somehow the appearance of Frances allowed um, this space that I didn't want to just write a boring thing. My mom's mom died giving birth to her, and this happened, and this happened. Instead, I realized what had been haunting us, me and my mom, because it's a generation. It's not my story, but I was raised and close to a person who was haunted by these absences. And then, ironically or paradoxically, like, I have the person who is the embodiment of that experience with whom I'm really, really close. And I think that probably for the past decade, I've been living in fear of her absence, and the absence is happening right here in the present. So it's these layers of complication that somehow Frances became a way to enter into that space without having to tell us a straight story of the family. It became more of like, what are these giant questions that are plaguing me about the actual things that happened in the family?
That's what it felt like when I was reading it, as if you had managed to bridge some distance or to create some distance between, your story, which also makes it more of a universal story coming through Frances. And then I noticed that she's not in every poem, obviously.
Yeah.
She seems like she was sort of a diving off point for some of
And I
the.
don't know how many poems she's in. I mean, I could do the work. She's not like, there's some poems that are titled like Tuesday and Next Tuesday that she appears in them, but she's not in the title. So I don't really know. I think it might be like 1/3 of the book. So
It's so fantastic when something like that happens, though. What a gift to be given that vehicle for this material after all that time.
yeah.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for all of your kind words about this book.
I loved it. And where is the best place for people to buy the book?
As always, it's wonderful to support small presses. So Lily Poetry Review Books, or it's okay to support authors directly too. So they're it's on my website, and my website's just my name, lauravanprooyen.com. And I'm here, and I physically sign them and send them to the occasional person who wants to buy it that way. So either of those places are great, but there's kind of no bad way to get your hands on the book.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you.